Millionaire CEO helps janitor with his baby in parking lot so he can study before anything else. Let's see how connected we really are. What's one thing you can see from your window right now? Victoria Sterling's Louboutin heels clicked against the marble floor of the Sterling Tech Tower as she stepped out of the executive elevator at 11:47 p.m. The 42-year-old CEO had just finished a grueling 12-hour board meeting, and exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like an expensive but heavy coat. Her perfectly styled auburn hair remained immaculate despite the long day, and her tailored Armani suit showed no signs of wrinkle, the armor of a woman who had built a $3 billion empire from nothing. The parking garage should have been empty at this hour, but as Victoria walked toward her silver Bentley Bentayga, she heard something that made her freeze mid-step. A baby was crying, not the distant wail from a passing car, but the urgent, desperate sound of an infant in distress, echoing through the concrete structure. Following the sound, Victoria rounded the corner between two concrete pillars and discovered a scene that would be burned into her memory forever. Marcus Thompson, the night janitor she'd passed countless times without a second glance, sat on the floor against his beat-up Honda Civic, cradling a wailing baby in his arms. His cleaning cart was parked nearby, and spread across the ground were engineering textbooks, notebooks covered in complex calculations, and a baby bottle that had apparently rolled just out of reach. "Please, Nathan, please stop crying," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking with exhaustion and desperation. The 28-year-old man's face was streaked with tears that matched his son's. "Daddy's trying to study, buddy. Daddy's trying to make things better for us." Victoria stood frozen, watching this intimate moment of struggle. Marcus wore his cleaning uniform, navy blue pants and a matching shirt with Sterling Tech Maintenance embroidered on the pocket, but surrounding him were advanced engineering textbooks that looked far more complex than anything she'd studied in her business degree. Little Nathan, with his father's dark curls and impossibly long eyelashes, continued to cry, his tiny fists waving frantically in the air. He couldn't have been more than 13 months old, Victoria estimated, noting the way he held his head up and the determined way he reached for objects around him. "The bottle," Victoria said softly, stepping forward. "It rolled away from you." Marcus's head snapped up, his dark eyes wide with mortification. "Miss Sterling, I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone would be here this late. I can move, I just—" "Don't apologize," Victoria interrupted, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. She walked over and picked up the bottle, testing its temperature against her wrist, a motion that came from somewhere deep and forgotten. "He's hungry. I was trying to feed him and study at the same time," Marcus explained hurriedly, struggling to stand while holding the crying baby. "My babysitter cancelled last minute, and I have my engineering dynamics exam tomorrow morning. If I fail this class, I'll lose my spot in the program, and then I can't—" His voice cracked. "I promised her I'd give him everything. I promised Sarah I'd make sure Nathan never wanted for anything." Victoria felt something twist painfully in her chest at the mention of a woman's name. "Sarah? My wife," Marcus said quietly, then corrected himself with visible pain. "My late wife. She died giving birth to Nathan. Complications during delivery. She made me promise in those last few minutes." He trailed off, unable to continue. The bottle slipped from Victoria's suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the concrete. The sound seemed to echo endlessly in the parking garage, mixing with Nathan's cries and the sudden roar of blood in Victoria's ears. "She died in childbirth?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Hemorrhaging," Marcus nodded, bouncing Nathan gently. "The doctor said it sometimes just happens. One moment she was perfect, holding Nathan for the first time, and then—" He took a shaky breath. "I almost lost them both. Nathan was without oxygen for a few minutes. The doctors weren't sure if there would be complications, but he's perfect. He's absolutely perfect." Victoria bent to retrieve the fallen bottle with trembling hands. 22 years. 22 years since she'd held a baby bottle, since she'd felt the weight of an infant in her arms, since she'd heard that particular cry that meant everything and nothing all at once. "Here," she said, offering Marcus the bottle. But when he shifted Nathan to take it, the baby's crying intensified, and something inside Victoria broke open like a dam. "May I?" Marcus hesitated for only a moment before carefully transferring his son to Victoria's arms. Nathan was warm and solid, heavier than she'd expected, but lighter than her memories. His crying began to subside the moment she settled him in the crook of her arm, positioning the bottle at exactly the right angle. Muscle memory she thought she'd lost forever. "How did you know to do that?" Marcus asked, wonder in his voice, as Nathan began drinking contentedly. Victoria couldn't answer immediately. She was too busy memorizing the weight of the baby in her arms, the soft sighs he made as he drank, the way his tiny hand instinctively curled around her finger when she offered it. This was Nathan Thompson, 13 months old, with his father's determined jaw and what she imagined were his mother's gentle eyes. "I had," Victoria started, then stopped. She never spoke about James. Never. Not to business partners, not to employees, not to the therapists she'd tried and discarded over the years. "I had a son once." "Had?" Marcus's voice was careful, understanding. "He died during delivery. Same as your Sarah, but opposite." Victoria's voice was steady, but Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly as she held Nathan. "James William Sterling. He would have been 22 next month. I survived, he didn't. My husband blamed me, said I was so focused on building the company that I didn't take care of myself properly. He left me in the hospital." The parking garage fell silent except for Nathan's soft suckling sounds and the distant hum of ventilation systems. Marcus sank back down to the floor, his textbooks forgotten. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can't imagine." "I can't imagine raising a child alone," Victoria replied, looking down at Nathan's peaceful face. "But here you are, working nights to pay for school, studying engineering to build a better future for him. What did you promise, Sarah?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears again. "That Nathan would never know poverty, that he'd have every opportunity I never had, that he'd go to the best schools, live in a safe neighborhood, have books and music lessons and whatever dreams he wanted to chase. Sarah grew up with nothing, just like me. She was so smart, smarter than me, but she never got the chance to go to college. She made me swear that Nathan would have choices." Nathan had finished his bottle and was now looking up at Victoria with curious, sleepy eyes. She found herself humming softly, a lullaby she thought she'd forgotten, and watched as his eyelids began to droop. "How close are you to graduation?" Victoria asked. 2 years if I can keep my grades up. I'm majoring in mechanical engineering with a focus on renewable energy systems. I want to design better solar panels, more efficient wind turbines. Sarah always said I could change the world if I just got the education. Marcus gathered his textbooks carefully. "I should let you go home, Ms. Sterling. Thank you for helping with Nathan. I promise this won't happen again." Victoria looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, then at Marcus's engineering textbooks, then at the cleaning cart that represented his current reality. Something was shifting inside her chest, something that felt dangerous and necessary and absolutely terrifying. "What time is your exam tomorrow?" 9 a.m. But I still have 3 chapters to review, and Nathan will be awake by 6, and "Give me your address," Victoria said suddenly. Marcus looked confused. "Ma'am, I'm going to send someone to watch Nathan tomorrow so you can focus on your exam, and we need to talk about your childcare situation." Victoria carefully transferred the sleeping baby back to his father's arms. "This isn't sustainable, Marcus. You can't study in parking garages with a baby." "Miss Sterling, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," Victoria interrupted, though she wasn't entirely sure what it was. "It's an investment. You're clearly intelligent and dedicated. Sterling Tech needs engineers like you. Consider this a scholarship program." Marcus stood slowly, Nathan secure in his arms. "I don't understand." Victoria pulled out her phone and began typing. "Dr. Elena Rodriguez, my personal physician. I'm sending you her contact information. I want Nathan checked by the best pediatrician in the city. I'm also arranging for a nanny service to provide care while you're in school and working. Miss Sterling, this is too much. Your wife made you promise to give Nathan everything, Victoria said, her voice firm. Let me help you keep that promise. As Victoria walked toward her Bentley, her mind was already racing with plans and possibilities. But something nagged at her. Something about the coincidence of finding Marcus and Nathan tonight. Something about the way fate seemed to be offering her a second chance at something she'd thought was lost forever. She didn't notice the black sedan that had been parked in the shadows, didn't see the figure inside taking photographs, didn't realize that her spontaneous decision to help Marcus Thompson would set in motion a chain of events that would threaten everything she'd built and reveal secrets that some people had killed to keep hidden. As she drove home through the empty Seattle streets, Victoria Sterling had no idea that helping a janitor and his baby would lead her straight into the most dangerous game of her life. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Drop a comment below. Do you think Victoria is making the right choice? 3 weeks had passed since that night in the parking garage, and Victoria Sterling found herself doing something she hadn't done in over 2 decades. Looking forward to the end of the workday. Not because she was tired of working. Work had been her salvation, her fortress, her entire identity for 22 years. But because she knew that at 6:30 p.m. sharp, Marcus Thompson would bring Nathan to her office for what had become their daily routine. The arrangement had started practically. Marcus's exam had gone brilliantly. He'd scored a 97%, the highest in his class. But Victoria's hastily arranged childcare had fallen through within days. The nanny service had been professional but cold, and Nathan had cried inconsolably whenever Marcus left him. Dr. Rodriguez's examination had revealed what Victoria already suspected. Nathan was exceptionally bright and deeply attached to his father. He has remarkable cognitive development for 13 months, Dr. Rodriguez had told Victoria during a private consultation. But he's also showing signs of separation anxiety, which is completely normal given his circumstances. This child needs stability and consistency. So Victoria had made an unprecedented decision. She'd converted the conference room adjacent to her office into a combination nursery and study space. Marcus could bring Nathan to work, study between his janitorial duties, and Victoria could. Well, Victoria was still figuring out exactly what she was doing. "Good evening, Miss Sterling," Marcus said as he entered her office. Nathan balanced expertly on his hip. The baby immediately began babbling and reaching toward Victoria, a routine that never failed to make her heart skip. "Hello, Nathan," Victoria cooed, standing to take the baby from his father. Nathan had grown comfortable with her over the past 3 weeks, and now he greeted her with delighted squeals and grabby hands that inevitably went straight for her expensive jewelry. "Did you have a good day with Daddy? He's been saying new words," Marcus said proudly, setting down Nathan's diaper bag and his own backpack full of textbooks. "This morning he said book clear as day while I was studying, and yesterday I swear he said Toria." Victoria felt her breath catch. "Toria? He can't quite manage Victoria yet, but he definitely knows who you are. Watch this." Marcus knelt down to Nathan's eye level. "Nathan, where's Toria?" The baby immediately turned in Victoria's arms and patted her cheek with his small hand, babbling, "Tor, tor, tor." "Oh my God," Victoria whispered, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. James would have been talking by now, she thought. James would have been walking, maybe even running. James would have been. "Miss Sterling, are you okay?" Marcus's voice was gentle, concerned. Victoria blinked rapidly, forcing herself back to the present. "I'm fine. He's remarkable, Marcus. Truly remarkable." Over the past 3 weeks, Victoria had learned more about Marcus Thompson than she knew about most people in her life. He'd grown up in foster care in Detroit, aging out of the system at 18, with nothing but determination and a GED earned while living in his car. He'd met Sarah Martinez at a community college where they were both working toward their associate degrees, him in pre-engineering, her in early childhood education. Sarah wanted to be a kindergarten teacher, Marcus had told Victoria one evening, while Nathan played with a set of educational blocks she'd had delivered. She said that every kid deserved at least one adult who believed in them completely. She was going to be that person. They'd married young, worked multiple jobs to save money, and dreamed of a future where they could give their children everything they'd never had. Sarah had gotten pregnant during their final semester, and they'd been so excited about their little family. The plan had been simple. Marcus would transfer to the University of Washington for engineering. Sarah would finish her teaching degree once Nathan was older, and they'd build the stable, loving home neither of them had known as children. She made me promise to still transfer to UW, Marcus had continued, his voice thick with emotion. Even after the complications started, even when the doctors looked worried, she kept saying, "Promise me you'll still go. Promise me Nathan will have his daddy's dreams and my stubbornness." Now, watching Nathan stack blocks with unusual precision for a 13-month-old, Victoria marveled at how much her life had changed in just 3 weeks. She'd rearranged her schedule to accommodate Nathan's needs, found herself looking up child development milestones on her computer, and had even started leaving work early on Fridays so she could spend more time with him before Marcus's evening classes. "How was thermodynamics today?" Victoria asked, settling into her desk chair with Nathan on her lap. He immediately began reaching for her computer keyboard, a habit that simultaneously charmed and terrified her IT department. "Challenging, but good. Professor Chen thinks I have a real aptitude for thermal systems design." Marcus pulled out his textbook and opened to a page covered with complex equations. "I've been thinking about your idea, though, about the internship." Victoria had suggested that Marcus apply for Sterling Tech's prestigious engineering internship program, which typically went to students from top universities with perfect GPAs and family connections. It would mean better pay, flexible hours, and direct experience in renewable energy development, exactly the kind of opportunity that could launch his career. "And," Victoria prompted, bouncing Nathan gently as he tried to grab her Mont Blanc pen, "I'm worried about the application process. The other candidates will have advantages I don't have. Professors who know them personally, family connections, internships at other major companies." Marcus looked up from his book. "I don't want you to think I'm not grateful, because I am. More grateful than I can ever express. But I also don't want to be handed something I haven't earned." Nathan chose that moment to babble something that sounded remarkably like "Mama," and both adults froze. The baby was looking directly at Victoria, reaching for her face with both hands. "He doesn't know," Marcus said quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I mean, he's never. Sarah died so soon after he was born, and there haven't been any other women in his life except you, and I think he's confused about—" "It's okay," Victoria said softly, though her voice was shaking. "It's okay, Marcus." But it wasn't okay, not really. Every day with Nathan was a gift and a torture, a glimpse of the life she'd lost and could never have again. She was 42 years old, single, and had thrown herself so completely into building her empire that she'd forgotten there were other ways to build a legacy. "About the internship," she said, forcing herself to focus on Marcus's concerns. "You're right that other candidates might have advantages, but they don't have what you have, which is real motivation. Most of those students are chasing prestigious internships because it looks good on their resumes. You're doing this to keep a promise to your dying wife and build a future for your son. That kind of drive is rare, Marcus. It's exactly what we need at Sterling Tech." Nathan had settled contentedly in Victoria's arms and was now playing with her necklace, a delicate platinum chain with a small pendant that had been a gift from her mother. Victoria found herself thinking about legacy again, about the different ways people lived on after death. "There's something else," Marcus said hesitantly. "I've been doing some research on Sterling Tech's history, trying to understand the company better before I apply. I found some old articles about the founding, about your early struggles to get investors to take you seriously. Victoria stiffened slightly. She didn't like people digging into her past, even for innocent reasons. "I read about your husband," Marcus continued carefully. "Richard Sterling. The articles said he left you right after the company started showing real promise. They made it sound like he abandoned you when you needed him most." "The press loves a good story," Victoria said curtly. "And a woman building a tech empire alone sells more papers than the truth." "What is the truth?" Victoria looked down at Nathan, who had fallen asleep in her arms, his small hand still clutching her necklace. The truth was complicated. The truth was that Richard had blamed her for James's death, had accused her of caring more about her company than her pregnancy, had walked out of the hospital room while she was still bleeding and never come back. The truth was that she'd built Sterling Tech partly to prove him wrong and partly to have something to pour her grief into. "The truth is that some people aren't built for tragedy," she said finally. "Richard needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. Building Sterling Tech gave me a reason to get up every morning." Marcus nodded slowly. "Sarah and I used to talk about that sometimes, about how grief either breaks people apart or forges them into something stronger. I think about her every day, but especially when I'm studying, when I'm working toward the future she wanted for Nathan. It's like she's still here, pushing me forward." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. 22 years, and she'd never found a way to feel like James was pushing her forward. Instead, she'd felt like she was running away from his memory, building walls around herself so high that nothing could hurt her again. "Miss Sterling," Marcus's voice was gentle. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," Victoria lied, just as her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood run cold. The message was from an unknown number. "Enjoying playing house with the janitor and his bastard? Some secrets should stay buried. Stop now, or everyone will know what really happened 22 years ago." Victoria's hands began shaking so violently that Nathan stirred in her arms. Marcus immediately noticed her distress. "What's wrong?" Victoria deleted the message quickly, her mind racing. 22 years ago. That could only mean one thing, and if it was what she thought it was, then Marcus and Nathan were in danger simply by being associated with her. "Nothing," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Just a business matter. Marcus, I think we should discuss your internship application more tomorrow. It's getting late, and you have your evening class." Marcus looked confused by her sudden change in demeanor, but he packed up his books without argument. As he prepared to take Nathan from her arms, Victoria held the sleeping baby a moment longer than necessary, memorizing the weight of him, the soft sound of his breathing. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus said quietly, "whatever that message was about, whatever's wrong, you know you can trust me, right?" Victoria looked into his honest, concerned eyes and realized with a stab of pain that she was beginning to trust him. She was beginning to care about him and Nathan in ways that terrified her. And now, someone knew about her involvement with them. Someone who knew about secrets she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself they'd never existed. "I know," she lied again. "Good luck with your class tonight." As Marcus left with Nathan, Victoria stood at her office window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there was someone who knew the truth about what had happened 22 years ago. Someone who was watching her, threatening her. And now, Marcus and Nathan were part of it. She'd spent 2 decades building walls to protect herself, but in 3 weeks, a baby's laughter and a young father's dedication had begun to tear them down. The question was whether she could protect them from the consequences of caring about her, or whether history was about to repeat itself in the most devastating way possible. Victoria Sterling had built an empire from nothing, but she was about to discover that some foundations are built on lies, and some lies are worth killing for. What do you think that mysterious message means? Hit the like button if you're as worried about Victoria, Marcus and Nathan as I am. Comment below with your theories. The private investigator's office was exactly what Victoria had expected, cramped, dimly lit, and smelling faintly of cigarettes and desperation. Detective Ray Morrison, recently retired from the Seattle Police Department, looked like he'd walked straight out of a noir film. Rumpled suit, 5 o'clock shadow at 10 in the morning, and eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. "Let me get this straight," Morrison said, leaning back in his squeaky chair. "You want me to investigate a man who works for your company, find out everything about his background, and you won't tell me why?" Victoria sat rigidly across from him, her Hermes bag clutched in her lap like armor. It had been 4 days since she'd received that threatening text, and 3 more had followed, each more specific and menacing than the last. Someone was watching her, documenting her interactions with Marcus and Nathan, and they knew things about her past that should have died with the only other person who'd been there. "Marcus Thompson," she said, sliding a file across Morrison's desk. 28 years old, originally from Detroit. "I need to know everything. His real background, his late wife, how he ended up in Seattle, whether there are any connections to my company or my personal history that predate his employment." Morrison flipped through the file, raising an eyebrow at the comprehensive information Victoria had already compiled. "This is pretty thorough detective work for a CEO. Mind telling me what's got you spooked enough to hire me?" "I've been receiving threatening messages suggesting that Marcus isn't who he claims to be. I need to know if my instincts about him are correct or if I'm being manipulated." Victoria's voice was steady, but Morrison noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her knuckles were white where she gripped her bag. "What kind of threats?" Victoria hesitated. The messages had been increasingly specific, referencing not just her relationship with Marcus and Nathan, but details about her past that only one person should have known. Details about the night James died, about the decisions she'd made, about the cover-up that had protected her reputation and her company. "Someone knows about a mistake I made a long time ago," she said finally. "They're suggesting that my involvement with Marcus is connected to that mistake." Morrison studied her carefully. He'd worked enough cases to recognize when someone was holding back crucial information, but he also recognized the particular brand of fear that came from buried secrets threatening to surface. "All right, Ms. Sterling. My rate is $500 a day plus expenses. I'll need 3 days to do a thorough background check, maybe longer if I find anything unusual." He leaned forward. "But I'll tell you right now, if this man is running some kind of long con on you, there'll be warning signs. Professional grifters always leave a trail." As Victoria left Morrison's office, she felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Marcus had done nothing to earn her suspicion except be in the wrong place at the wrong time, with a story that tugged at her heartstrings. But 22 years of protecting herself from emotional vulnerability had taught her that coincidences were rarely innocent. Her phone buzzed with another text. "Enjoying your little investigation? Poor Marcus has no idea what kind of woman is playing with his life. Ask him about the car accident that killed his foster parents when he was 17. Ask him why he was never charged." Victoria's hands shook as she deleted the message. Whoever was sending these knew details about Marcus that weren't in any public record. They were watching both of them, had access to information that should have been confidential, and they were methodically building toward something. That evening, Victoria sat in her office with Nathan on her lap, watching Marcus study at the conference table. Over the past month, this had become her sanctuary. The quiet sounds of page turning and Nathan's babbling, the sense of something like family that she'd never thought she'd experience again. "Daddy," Nathan said suddenly, clear as day, and Marcus's head shot up with delight. "Did you hear that? He said Daddy! That's his first real word." Marcus's face was radiant with joy and pride. Victoria felt her heart squeeze painfully. Nathan was developing so quickly, hitting milestones that amazed even Dr. Rodriguez. At 14 months, he was already attempting words, showing remarkable problem-solving skills, and demonstrating an emotional intelligence that seemed far beyond his age. "He's extraordinary, Marcus," Victoria said, and meant it. "Dr. Rodriguez says his cognitive development is exceptional. She thinks he might be gifted. Sarah always said he would be special," Marcus replied, his voice soft with memory. She had this intuition about people, especially children. She could look at a kid and tell you exactly what kind of support they needed to thrive. Nathan chose that moment to point at Victoria and say, "Mama," with perfect clarity. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked mortified. Victoria felt like she'd been struck by lightning, and Nathan looked pleased with himself for mastering a new word. "I'm sorry," Marcus started. "I don't know why he keeps—" "It's okay," Victoria interrupted, though her voice was barely steady. "He's confused about relationships. It's natural." But as she held Nathan's warm weight against her chest, Victoria realized it wasn't confusion at all. Somehow this child had claimed a piece of her heart she'd thought was permanently closed off. The maternal instincts she'd buried with James were alive and fierce and terrifying. "Marcus," she said suddenly, "tell me about your foster parents." "The ones who died when you were 17. Marcus went very still, his textbook forgotten. "How do you know about them?" "I did some research before offering you the internship. It's standard procedure." The lie came easily, but Victoria hated herself for it. "The records just said car accident. I wondered if you wanted to talk about it." For a long moment Marcus didn't respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, controlled. "Tom and Linda Richards. They took me in when I was 15, after my previous placement didn't work out. They were good people, patient people. They helped me get my GED, encouraged me to think about college." "What happened?" Tom had been drinking. Not a lot, just enough to slow his reflexes. Black ice on the highway, lost control of the car. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "I was supposed to be with them that night. We were going to drive up to Spokane to look at the community college, make it a weekend trip. But I got food poisoning the day before and couldn't travel." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. Food poisoning, 24-hour bug, or so I thought, hit me so suddenly I could barely stand up. Tom and Linda decided to go ahead without me, said they'd bring back brochures and application materials. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes dark with old pain. "If I'd been in that car, I would have died with them. Sometimes I wonder if I should have." "Don't say that," Victoria said sharply. "Nathan needs you. Sarah made you promise." "I know. And logically, I know that survivors' guilt is normal, that their deaths weren't my fault. But there were people who asked questions afterward. Police, social workers, insurance investigators. They wanted to know about my relationship with Tom and Linda, about why I wasn't in the car, about whether I had any reason to want them dead." Victoria's blood went cold. Why would they ask that? Because Tom and Linda were planning to officially adopt me. It would have made me their heir, eligible for their life insurance, their house, everything. When they died, all of that money went to Linda's sister instead. Some people thought it was convenient that I got sick at exactly the right time to avoid the accident. Nathan had fallen asleep in Victoria's arms, but she continued to hold him, drawing comfort from his presence as the implications of Marcus's story sank in. Someone knew about the suspicions surrounding his foster parents' deaths. Someone who was using that knowledge to threaten her. Were you ever officially cleared? The investigation was closed without charges. The food poisoning was documented by the hospital, and there was no evidence of foul play in the car accident. Tom had a blood alcohol level of 0.9, not falling down drunk, but enough to impair his driving. The roads were icy. Visibility was poor. Marcus shrugged. It was a tragic accident, nothing more. But as Victoria listened to Marcus's story, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The timing was too perfect, the circumstances too convenient, and someone out there knew enough details about the case to use it as leverage. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message made her blood freeze. "Beautiful family picture, you, Marcus, and the baby. Shame it won't last. Meet me tomorrow night, 10 p.m. at the Pike Place Market. Come alone, or everyone discovers what really happened the night your son died. And this time, Marcus won't be so lucky with his accidents." Victoria's hands shook as she stared at the message. The threat was escalating, becoming more direct, more dangerous. Someone was prepared to hurt Marcus and Nathan to get to her, and she was no closer to understanding who or why. As she watched Marcus pack up his books, preparing for his evening class, Victoria realized that her attempt to help a struggling father and his son had awakened something in her that she'd thought was safely buried. But now, that awakening might cost them all everything. The game was becoming deadly, and Victoria Sterling was about to learn that some promises can't be kept without destroying the people you're trying to protect. Pike Place Market at 10 p.m. was a different world from the bustling daytime crowds. The familiar sounds of vendors calling out prices and tourists chattering were replaced by the echo of Victoria's heels against wet pavement and the distant hum of late-night Seattle traffic. She'd chosen to wear all black. Tactical, she told herself, though she knew it was really armor against whatever confrontation awaited her. Victoria had spent the entire day in a state of controlled panic, torn between cancelling this meeting and bringing security versus following the instructions exactly as given. In the end, her need to protect Marcus and Nathan had overridden her survival instincts. She'd left detailed instructions with her attorney about her estate and a sealed letter for Marcus explaining everything, just in case. Victoria Sterling. The voice came from behind her, smooth and cultured with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. You look exactly like your mother did at your age. Victoria spun around to face a man in his 60s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal wool coat and leather gloves. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His posture spoke of old money and older secrets, and his eyes held the kind of calculating intelligence that had built and destroyed empires. "Do I know you?" Victoria asked, though something about him tugged at her memory. "We met once, very briefly, 22 years ago. I was Richard's business partner in those days, before your husband's spectacular failure of nerve." The man stepped closer, and Victoria caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something that reminded her of hospitals. "My name is Dr. Harrison Blackwood. I delivered your son." The world tilted sideways. Victoria grabbed the nearest market stall for support, her mind reeling. Dr. Blackwood had been Richard's choice for her obstetrician, a private physician who catered to Seattle's elite families. She remembered his hands, cold and precise, remembered his voice telling her to push, then later telling her that her son was gone. "You're dead," Victoria whispered. "You died in a car accident 5 years ago. I read your obituary. Cleverly staged, I must say. Amazing what money and the right connections can accomplish." Dr. Blackwood smiled, and it was the most chilling expression Victoria had ever seen. "I needed to disappear for a while, let certain investigations die down, allow certain people to stop asking uncomfortable questions." "What investigations?" "The kind that arise when people start noticing patterns, dead babies, grieving mothers, substantial life insurance payouts, adoption fees that never quite made it to the proper agencies." Dr. Blackwood adjusted his gloves with medical precision. "You weren't my only patient who suffered such a tragic loss, Victoria. Over the years, I helped many wealthy couples through their darkest hours." Victoria felt bile rise in her throat. "James, what did you do to James?" "Your son was born healthy and beautiful, just as you've always suspected in your heart. 10 fingers, 10 toes, perfectly formed lungs that announced his arrival with a lusty cry." "Doctor." Blackwood's voice was conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "Richard, unfortunately, had developed some rather expensive gambling debts to the kind of people who break more than kneecaps when they're not paid promptly." The market spun around Victoria. 22 years of grief, 22 years of believing she'd failed as a mother, 22 years of building walls around her heart, and it had all been built on a lie. "You sold my baby," she said, the words barely a whisper. "I provided a service." Richard needed money quickly, and there were people willing to pay handsomely for a healthy newborn from good genetic stock. Everyone won. Richard's debts were cleared, desperate couples got the children they'd prayed for, and you. Dr. Blackwood paused, his head tilted like a curious bird. "Well, You got to build your empire without the distraction of a child." Victoria's hand flew to her mouth and she stumbled backward. "Richard knew? Richard orchestrated it, contacted me months before your due date, worked out all the details. The only problem was that you were so healthy, so determined to be present for every moment of the birth. We had to be creative. The medication. You gave me something that made me unconscious. A mild sedative, perfectly harmless. You were out for perhaps 30 minutes, long enough for me to complete the delivery and for Richard to take James to his new family. When you woke up, we had prepared a tragic story about complications, about how hard we'd fought to save him." Victoria doubled over, dry heaving as 22 years of repressed grief and rage crashed over her. Everything she'd believed about herself, about her marriage, about her ability to protect the people she loved, all of it had been lies built on the greatest betrayal imaginable. "Where is he?" she demanded, straightening up with tremendous effort. "Where is James?" Dr. Blackwood smiled again. "That's where our story becomes truly interesting, my dear. You see, I've been watching you for months, ever since you began your little charity project with that young man and his son. Imagine my surprise when I realized who Marcus Thompson really is." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. "No. Oh, yes. Your precious janitor, your surrogate son, your second chance at redemption. He's James William Sterling. Your son has been working in your building, walking past you in hallways, emptying your trash cans for 6 months without either of you knowing the truth." Victoria's legs gave out, and she sank onto a nearby bench. The implications crashed over her in waves. Marcus's intelligence, his determination, his natural leadership qualities, Nathan's remarkable development, his instant connection to her, the way he'd called her Mama with such certainty. "You're lying," she said weakly, though her heart was already accepting what her mind refused to believe. "Am I?" "Think about the coincidences, Victoria. A brilliant young man appears at your company, working far beneath his capabilities. A child who bonds with you instantly, who shows exceptional intelligence, who looks at you with eyes that are unmistakably your own. Did you never wonder why Marcus seemed so familiar?" Victoria closed her eyes and saw Marcus's face, the shape of his jaw, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking, the gesture he made with his hands when he was explaining something complex. Features she'd attributed to attractive genetics were actually her own, reflected back at her through 22 years of separation. "The foster parents who died," Victoria said suddenly. "Tom and Linda Richards. They were going to adopt him officially. They were asking too many questions about his birth certificate, about his medical records. Some secrets are worth killing for, Victoria. I couldn't risk them discovering the truth and disrupting my carefully constructed new life. You murdered them. I arranged for their removal, yes. A little antifreeze in young Marcus's food to keep him safely at home, some black ice on a treacherous mountain road, and 2 problems solved permanently. Doctor, Blackwood checked his expensive watch. Unfortunately, Marcus has proven remarkably resilient over the years, aging out of foster care, working his way through community college, somehow managing to land on his feet despite every obstacle I've placed in his path. Victoria stood up slowly, her business instincts finally overriding her emotional shock. This was a negotiation now, and she was one of the best negotiators in the world. What do you want? 2 things. First, $50 million, transferred to accounts I'll provide, in exchange for my continued silence about your family reunion. Second, you're going to fire Marcus Thompson and ensure he never works in engineering again. He's getting too close to success, and successful people ask uncomfortable questions. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure Marcus learns the truth about his birth, about his adoptive parents' deaths, and about the woman who's been manipulating his emotions for her own psychological healing. Imagine how betrayed he'll feel, how angry. Imagine little Nathan growing up knowing his father's entire life was built on lies. Doctor. Blackwood pulled out his phone and showed Victoria a series of photographs. herself holding Nathan, Marcus studying in her conference room, intimate moments of connection she'd thought were private. "I've been documenting your relationship for months." To the right journalist, this could look like a very sick story indeed. Wealthy CEO discovers her long-lost son, but instead of revealing the truth, she manipulates him for her own emotional gratification. She watches him struggle, lets him call her by name, allows his child to see her as a mother figure, all while knowing she could end his suffering with a single conversation. Victoria felt nauseated by the twisted logic, but she could see how the story would play in the media. Her reputation, her company, everything she'd built would be destroyed. "You have 24 hours to decide," Dr. Blackwood continued. "Transfer the money and destroy Marcus's future, or watch both your lives implode in the most public, devastating way possible." As Dr. Blackwood walked away, disappearing into the shadows between market stalls, Victoria remained on the bench, staring at the photographs on her phone of Marcus and Nathan, her son, her grandson. Her family finally found after 22 years of searching in all the wrong places. But loving them meant destroying them, and saving them meant losing them forever. Victoria Sterling had never faced a more impossible choice. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She sat in her office until dawn, staring at financial documents that could transfer $50 million with a few keystrokes, and personnel files that could end Marcus Thompson's engineering career before it truly began. But mostly, she stared at the conference room where her son, came every evening to study while his child played nearby. The security footage from her computer showed Marcus arriving at 6 a.m. for his janitorial shift, just as he had every day for 6 months. But now Victoria saw everything differently. The way he moved with unconscious confidence through her building, the proprietary care he took with details, the natural leadership he displayed with other maintenance staff. These weren't the characteristics of someone content to clean offices forever. They were the traits of someone temporarily displaced from his rightful place in the world. At 7:30 a.m., Victoria made a decision that went against every survival instinct she'd developed over 22 years. Instead of waiting for their usual evening meeting, she walked down to the building's lower level, where Marcus was restocking supply closets. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus looked surprised to see her outside of executive territory, especially this early. "Is everything all right?" Looking at him now, with the truth burning in her chest, Victoria wondered how she'd missed the resemblance. Marcus had her chin, her father's strong hands, and when he smiled, which he was doing now, concerned but warm, it was her mother's smile reflected back at her. "I need to speak with you, privately. It's about your internship application." They walked to a small conference room on the 3rd floor, neutral territory that wouldn't raise questions if security cameras picked up their conversation. Victoria's hands were shaking as she closed the door, and she had to concentrate to keep her voice steady. "Marcus, I need to ask you some questions about your childhood, about your adoption." Marcus's expression grew cautious. "Is this still about the internship? Because I thought we'd established that my background, while unconventional, doesn't disqualify me from—" "This isn't about qualification." Victoria sat down across from him, noting how he automatically straightened his shoulders when sensing a serious conversation. Another gesture she recognized from her own mirror. "Do you remember anything about your birth family? Anything at all?" "Nothing concrete. I was told my parents died in a car accident when I was 3 months old, and there were no relatives able to care for me. The adoption records were sealed, and I've never tried to open them." Marcus studied Victoria's face carefully. "Why are you asking me this?" Victoria pulled out her phone and showed him a photograph she'd found in her personal files the night before. Herself at 20, pregnant and glowing, standing next to Richard outside the building that would become Sterling Tech headquarters. "This was taken 6 months before I gave birth to my son James," she said quietly. "He died during delivery, or at least that's what I believed for 22 years. Marcus looked at the photograph, then back at Victoria, confusion clear in his dark eyes. I don't understand what this has to do with... Look at me, Marcus. Really look at me. Look at the shape of my hands, the way I gesture when I'm thinking. Look at your own reflection and tell me you don't see the resemblance. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Victoria watched as understanding dawned slowly in his expression, followed quickly by disbelief, then shock, then something that looked like fear. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Yesterday I hired a private investigator to look into your background, but last night someone contacted me with information that makes investigation unnecessary." Victoria's voice was steady, but tears were streaming down her face. "Marcus, you're James William Sterling. You're my son." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window, his hands running through his hair in a gesture Victoria had made 1,000 times. "This is insane. You can't just... People don't just find their children working as janitors in their own buildings. This is something that happens in movies, not real life. Dr. Harrison Blackwood delivered you. Richard, my ex-husband, had gambling debts that he couldn't pay. They staged your death and sold you to Tom and Linda Richards, who thought they were adopting a baby whose birth mother had died in a car accident." Marcus whirled around to face her. "Tom and Linda never mentioned anything about a car accident. They said my birth parents died when I was 3 months old, that there had been some kind of custody dispute among relatives, but that those details were sealed with the adoption records. Because Dr. Blackwood was running multiple schemes, selling babies to different families with different stories. What mattered was that desperate couples got healthy infants, and he got paid handsomely for his services." "Prove it," Marcus said suddenly. "If this is true, prove it." Victoria had been prepared for this request. She pulled out a manila envelope containing DNA test results she'd ordered, rushed through a private lab, using samples from Marcus's coffee cup and Nathan's binky. "Preliminary results," she said, sliding the papers across the table. "We share 50% genetic markers. Nathan shares 25% with me, which makes me his biological grandmother. If you want more comprehensive testing, we can arrange that, but these results are accurate to 99.7%. Marcus stared at the papers, his hands trembling as he read the scientific confirmation of what his heart was already beginning to accept. 22 years, he said finally. 22 years you thought I was dead, and I thought you didn't want me. I mourned you every single day. I built Sterling Tech partly as a monument to your memory, partly to have something to pour my grief into so I could function." Victoria's voice broke. "And you, God, Marcus, you've been working here for 6 months. 6 months of walking past each other, of me not recognizing my own child." "Sarah," Marcus said suddenly, "does this mean Nathan isn't really? Was our marriage based on... Nathan is your son in every way that matters. You raised him, you love him, you're the only father he's ever known. Sarah loved you completely. Nothing about your adoption changes that relationship." Marcus sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "The night I found you with Nathan in the parking garage, you knew something then, didn't you? The way you looked at him, the way you held him. I felt a connection I couldn't explain. Nathan reminded me of dreams I'd given up, but I thought it was just maternal instinct that had been dormant for too long. I never imagined." "Dr. Blackwood," Marcus said suddenly. "The man who delivered me. Is he still alive?" Victoria's blood went cold. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the part of the truth that would shatter the fragile hope building between them. "He's very much alive, and he's been watching us, Marcus. He's been watching our relationship develop, documenting our interactions, and now he's threatening to destroy both our lives unless I meet his demands." "What demands?" $50 million and a promise to end your engineering career before it begins. He wants me to fire you, blacklist you from any technical position, ensure that you never achieve the success that might lead you to ask questions about your past." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm with a deadly undertone Victoria recognized from her own business negotiations. So our choice is to pay him off and I spend the rest of my life working menial jobs, or he exposes everything and destroys both our reputations. That's not our only choice, Victoria said carefully. But the other options are dangerous, Marcus. This man has killed to protect his secrets. Tom and Linda Richards died because they were asking too many questions about your birth certificate. He murdered my parents. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He arranged their accident, yes. And he's made it clear that he's willing to do the same to protect himself now. Marcus stood up slowly, and Victoria saw something shift in his expression. Something hard and determined that reminded her of herself in the early days of building Sterling Tech. Then we don't give him the chance, Marcus said quietly. We end this, Mom. We end this permanently. The word Mom hit Victoria like a physical blow, 22 years of longing and loss contained in 3 simple letters. But before she could respond, Marcus was already moving toward the door. Where are you going? To pick up Nathan from daycare. Then I'm taking him somewhere safe while we figure out how to destroy Dr. Harrison Blackwood before he destroys us. As Victoria watched her son, her brilliant, determined, fierce son, walk away, she realized that Marcus had inherited more than just her physical features. He'd inherited her ruthless survival instincts and her absolute refusal to let anyone threaten the people she loved. Dr. Blackwood had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd underestimated what a mother and son could accomplish when they finally found each other and refused to be separated again. The game was about to change, and Victoria Sterling was done playing defense. "You sure about this plan, Miss Sterling?" Morrison whispered. "Once Blackwood arrives, there's no going back if something goes wrong." "Something already went wrong 22 years ago," Victoria replied, adjusting the wire concealed beneath her silk blouse. "Tonight, we make it right." The plan was dangerous but simple. Victoria would meet Dr. Blackwood as arranged, but instead of bringing $50 million, she'd bring a recording device and Detective Morrison as backup. They needed Blackwood to confess on tape, not just to the baby selling scheme, but to the murder of Tom and Linda Richards. Once they had that evidence, Morrison's contacts in the FBI could move quickly to arrest Blackwood before he could disappear again. Car headlights swept across the warehouse entrance. Victoria's heart hammered as she recognized the silver Mercedes that had been following her for weeks. "Doctor." Blackwood stepped out, looking perfectly composed, despite the late hour and questionable location. "Punctual as always, Victoria. I do appreciate that in a business partner." "We're not partners," Victoria said, walking forward with briefcase in hand. "I'm here to end this nightmare you created, and I'm here to collect what's owed me. $50 million, plus interest for 22 years of maintaining your secret." Blackwood smiled his cold, reptilian smile. "Where's young Marcus tonight? Not studying in your office, I see." "Marcus is safe, far away from your reach." "Is he? Because my associates have been watching all your properties, Ms. Sterling. They're very thorough, very patient. Finding one young man and his child shouldn't prove too difficult." Victoria's blood went cold. "If you hurt them, then you'll what? Destroy me? My dear woman, I hold every card in this game. Your reputation, your son's life, your grandson's future, all of it rests in my hands." This was the moment Victoria had been waiting for. She opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of documents instead of money. "Actually, Dr. Blackwood, I think you'll find the game has changed significantly." Blackwood frowned, stepping closer to examine the briefcase contents. "What is this?" "Birth certificates. 23 of them, to be exact. All babies you delivered over a 15-year period, all reported as stillborn or died from complications, all sold to families who paid cash for private adoptions." Victoria pulled out a thick file folder. Medical records showing healthy deliveries that somehow became tragic deaths. Financial records showing payments from desperate couples that never made it to legitimate adoption agencies. And most importantly, testimony from 3 families who discovered the truth and have been looking for you for years. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Meet Jennifer and Michael Crawford, whose stillborn daughter Amanda is now 25 and working as a doctor in Portland. Meet David and Susan Chen, whose complications during delivery, son Kevin is a successful attorney in San Francisco. Meet Robert and Carol Martinez. Victoria paused, watching Blackwood's face pale. Oh, that's right. You remember the Martinez family. They were asking too many questions about their daughter Sarah's birth records. Sarah Martinez, Blackwood whispered. Marcus's wife, my daughter-in-law, and another one of your victims. Sarah spent her whole life wondering why she felt disconnected from her adoptive family, why she had skills and interests that no one else shared. She was researching her birth records when she got pregnant with Nathan, trying to understand her medical history. Victoria pulled out a final document. Sarah's research found among her personal effects after she died. She'd tracked down 3 other families with similar stories, all connected to Dr. Harrison Blackwood. She was building a case against you. Sarah died in childbirth. Natural complications. Did she? Because I had her medical records reviewed by an independent expert. Dr. Patricia Wong at Seattle Children's Hospital found something very interesting. Victoria's voice was deadly quiet. Sarah Martinez died from a rare drug interaction, something that wouldn't show up in standard toxicology unless you knew exactly what to look for. The same drug interaction that would be caused by a medication you had easy access to in your private practice. Blackwood took a step backward. You can't prove any of this. I can prove all of it. The FBI has been building a case against you for 2 years, ever since the Martinez family filed a complaint about their daughter's suspicious death. They just needed someone with resources and motivation to help them connect all the pieces. As if summoned by her words, FBI agents emerged from the shadows around the warehouse, led by Agent Sarah Chen, Kevin Chen's sister, and one of the children Blackwood had stolen and sold. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, Agent Chen announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, kidnapping, and the murders of Tom Richards, Linda Richards, and Sarah Martinez Thompson. But as the agents moved forward, Blackwood pulled out a gun Victoria hadn't seen coming. 23 families, he said, his cultured facade cracking to reveal the monster beneath. 23 children who found better lives than their birth parents could have provided. I gave desperate couples the families they dreamed of, and I gave unwanted children homes with parents who truly wanted them. You gave them lives built on lies, Victoria said, standing her ground despite the weapon pointed at her chest. You destroyed families, murdered innocent people, and sold children like commodities. I created miracles. Do you think Marcus would have been better off with a 20-year-old mother and a gambling addict father? Do you think those other children would have thrived in homes where they weren't truly wanted? That wasn't your choice to make, Agent Chen said, her own weapon drawn. Put the gun down, Doctor. It's over. It's not over until I say it's over, Blackwood snarled. Victoria, you're going to call off these agents and transfer that money, or I'm going to make sure you never see your precious family again. My family, Victoria said quietly, is stronger than you ever imagined. The warehouse door behind Blackwood opened, and Marcus stepped inside, carrying Nathan in one arm and a thick folder in the other. Hello, Dr. Blackwood, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. I believe you and I have some unfinished business. Blackwood spun toward Marcus, keeping his gun trained on Victoria. You should be halfway to Canada by now, boy. Actually, I've been visiting some very interesting people, starting with Dr. Patricia Wong, who explained exactly how my wife died, then Kevin Chen, who told me about his sister's FBI investigation, then Jennifer Crawford, Michael Crawford, David and Susan Martinez, and 15 other families who've been waiting years for justice. Marcus set Nathan down carefully behind a concrete pillar, ensuring his son was protected, then faced the man who had destroyed and shaped his entire life. You killed Sarah because she was getting too close to the truth. You killed Tom and Linda because they were asking questions about my birth certificate. And you've spent 22 years thinking you were untouchable. I gave you life, boy. I gave you parents who loved you, opportunities you never would have had. You gave me trauma and loss, and 22 years of wondering why I never felt like I belonged anywhere. Marcus's voice was steel, but you also gave me something you didn't intend. You gave me the determination to survive, to fight, to protect the people I love, no matter what the cost. Blackwood's hand was shaking now, the gun wavering between Victoria and Marcus. You think this ends with my arrest? There are others involved, other doctors, other facilities. This network has been operating for 30 years, had been operating, Agent Chen corrected. We've been coordinating with agencies in 6 states. Tonight's arrests will shut down the entire operation. Nathan chose that moment to toddle out from behind the pillar, babbling happily and reaching for Victoria. In the split second that Blackwood's attention was diverted by the child, Marcus lunged forward. The struggle was brief but intense. Marcus had 22 years of anger fueling his strength, while Blackwood had the desperation of a cornered animal. The gun went off once, the bullet going harmlessly into the warehouse ceiling before Marcus managed to pin Blackwood to the ground. "This is for Tom and Linda," Marcus said quietly, holding Blackwood down while Agent Chen secured the weapon. "This is for Sarah, and this is for every family you destroyed with your lies." As FBI agents handcuffed Dr. Harrison Blackwood and read him his rights, Victoria scooped Nathan into her arms and watched her son stand up slowly, his face reflecting 22 years of questions finally answered. "It's over," Marcus said, looking at Victoria with eyes that held pain, relief, and something that might have been hope. "It's over," Victoria agreed, then corrected herself. "No, it's beginning." 3 months later, Victoria Sterling stood in the nursery she'd had built adjacent to her office, watching Nathan play with blocks, while Marcus reviewed engineering schematics at a desk by the window. The Sterling Tech Advanced Energy Division was Marcus's project now, his vision of sustainable technology that would honor Sarah's memory and build Nathan's future. The media had called it the feel-good story of the decade. Billionaire CEO discovers her long-lost son working in her own building, uncovers criminal conspiracy, brings justice to dozens of families. But Victoria knew the real story was quieter, more complicated, and infinitely more precious. "Grandma Toria," Nathan said clearly, offering her a block with a proud smile. "Thank you, sweetheart," Victoria said, accepting the gift with hands that no longer shook when she held him. Marcus looked up from his work, smiling at the scene. "Dr. Rodriguez says his vocabulary is exceptional for 18 months. She thinks he might be ready for advanced learning programs." "He has time," Victoria replied. "We all have time now." Through her office windows, Victoria could see the city skyline that had been her kingdom for over 2 decades. But now, she understood that the real measure of success wasn't the empire she'd built from grief and determination. It was this moment, her son pursuing his dreams, her grandson learning to speak, and her own heart, finally, after 22 years, learning to trust in the possibility of family. Dr. Harrison Blackwood had been sentenced to life in prison without parole. The families he'd destroyed were finding each other, building connections, healing old wounds. And Victoria Sterling, who had spent decades protecting herself from loss, had finally learned that love was worth the risk. Some promises, she realized, were worth everything. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, and Victoria's heart still skipped when he called her that. "Sarah would have loved this. She would have loved seeing Nathan with his grandmother, seeing me doing work that matters." "She's seeing it," Victoria said with certainty, "and she's proud." As the Seattle sun set behind the Olympic Mountains, casting long shadows across the office that had become a nursery, Victoria Sterling finally understood what legacy really meant. It wasn't buildings or bank accounts or business empires. It was this: a child's laughter, a son's dreams, and the promise that love, no matter how long delayed, always finds its way home.